Larry, I feel like there is a famous Woody Allen line going to be uttered as we discuss this sham of a, second
Mockery,
impeachment. Yeah, mockery of a sham of a whatever. How
travesty
are
of
you?
the sham, or whatever.
Yes. How are you today, Larry?
Good, good.
I know that Crowdsource the Truth viewers are really eager to hear from you because people are feeling really uncertain, really uneasy. There's been a lot of talk about whether or not it's even constitutional to impeach somebody who is no longer president. And I know you're going to shed some light on this. I want to remind people, though, that they can learn more about Larry and his law group and support Freedom Watch by going to freedomwatchusa.org. That's the main website where you can make a tax-deductible contribution to the only law firm in the country that is actually defending our civil rights. It's also important for people to pick up Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution, Forget the Scandal Industry. Larry, there's so much for us to talk about tonight. Where do you want to begin?
Let's talk about the impeachment, because what really matters is not so much the impeachment. That's not going to have really any effect, even if Trump is convicted. I mean, basically, he did a great job for 4 years. We can see that. If you just look at the executive orders that Biden has issued in the last few days, over 20, repealing everything that Trump did, that's a testament to all that he did, all the good things he did. And of course, today, what's even worse of all the other things is that he signed the missile treaty with Russia, which freezes us and allows them to continue to develop hypersonic weapons and all kinds of things. And China's not even in it. So our national security has been put at great risk. Typical Democrats talk a big game, get us in wars, but then when it comes to actually supporting our military, they bail out. But that notwithstanding, getting back to this subject, the impeachment tells us a lot about just how corrupt our government is. All three branches. And that's what I wrote about in the book. It takes a revolution, forget the scandal industry, that we're going to have to rise up ourselves and wage a peaceful and legal revolution. If not, others are going to do it in a very bloody way, as Jefferson predicted. And we don't, of course, advocate that, but that's going to happen. And here's the story here is the thesis of my book, going back to Jefferson, who opposed federal judges in Article 3 because they would be unelected, unaccountable to the American people. And he predicted they would turn into despots and tyrants, which they surely have. You can see how they threw the President Trump, under the bus with regard to the massive fraud that stole the election for Biden and Harris and the Democrats. But he said because of that, we would probably have to wage a bloody revolution every 20 years or so. And then he said, what's a few thousand dead to refresh the tree of liberty? Now, he didn't want to see people dead. He didn't want to see violence, but he understood that that was a natural consequence of a government that breaks away from the American people. He understood that because he was an architect of the American Revolution, and he was also an architect of the French Revolution. He was in on the ground floor. He was an ambassador to France. And on July 14th, 1789, the same year that we enacted our Constitution, the French stormed the Bastille in Paris. And that was a lot like what we saw 2 weeks ago, Wednesday. This was not just a bunch of Antifa. It was not just people allegedly from the radical right. These were ordinary Americans, and most of them were ordinary Americans, and they walked into a building which they owned. And in fact, were let in by the police, by the Capitol Police, who have been much maligned. The police over the last few years maimed, attacked, even killed. And to characterize it as somehow an insurrection, I think is totally false. And the reason it's characterized that way is because the powers to be, the elite, the establishment in Washington feel threatened. They feel that their lives are threatened. And you know why their lives are threatened? Not by me, not by you, Jason, but because they become totally corrupt. And we saw just about a week ago that dog and pony show that it looked like the Keystone Cops. I mean, if you can remember that, from silent movies, running around like chickens without their heads, no common sense, out of control, lying like a sieve, and then enacting articles of impeachment, one article of impeachment. Now,
You're saying Congress was running around. Just to clarify, Larry, Congress was running around like the
Congress
Keystone
was
Cops?
running around. Yeah, Congress.
There's some questions about the conduct of the U.S. Capitol Police as well, aren't there? I mean, the chief has already resigned. The Capitol Police are a strange thing, Larry, because they've got this unique jurisdiction where they are charged with protecting the Capitol grounds, very limited area compared to other police departments around the country, but also individual members of Congress. And unlike most municipal police forces, which are led by the mayors of those municipalities, the U.S. Capitol Police are led by Nancy Pelosi. There's been no questioning of her, no accountability for the gross failures of security that day. Why have we heard nothing about this?
Well, I don't think it was a gross failure of security. I think that they let them in. And the reason they let them in is because they perceive the corruption, the rank corruption in this country. And see, that's the way this thing's being spun, is that this is an insurrection. They didn't go in there to hurt anybody, most of these people. Maybe one or two people did, but the great majority did not. These were ordinary people. And now the FBI, which is being used as the tool of Biden and Harris, is out there terrorizing people in the countryside, hunting them down, demanding their cell phones, otherwise they're going to slap a warrant on them. If they don't turn that over, they're threatening them with likely prosecution. I know because I've been contacted by some lawyers who are representing these people in Philadelphia in particular. And there was a hearing last week, if you can believe this. This was my case for the Philly cops, 8 of them, who were discharged without due process based upon Facebook posts, which the city didn't even let them know what they were, by a group called Plainview, that's obviously financed most likely by George Soros, that's been sued. We sued the district attorney, a guy named Larry Krasner, who was from the Jewish left. You know, I'm Jewish, but the Jewish left is behind a lot of this insurrection right now, along with radical other groups. And Krasner, along with the mayor, Jim Kennedy, who was running for re-election, and the police chief, Richard Ross, he got fired on a sexual harassment complaint, not over this. They brought in a new one, if you can believe this, named Danielle Outlaw, African-American woman from Portland, great name. Make the long story short, I had a status conference with the judge, and my colleague was there. I was off doing some other things, and what I understand is the judge said at the end of that status conference, "Gee, I trust your clients weren't in Washington, D.C." I mean, highly prejudicial, highly prejudicial. And this judge is going to have to answer for saying that, because it shows an extrajudicial bias and prejudice. He should recuse himself from the case at this point. But the point I'm getting to is that Donald Trump did not incite violence. Donald Trump stood up for what he believed, I believe correctly, was a grossly fraudulent election. Those people had a right to be in front of the Capitol. And the people that entered the Capitol did not enter, by and large, to hurt anybody. Now, there was people that died, and that's tragic. And maybe there were a couple bad agitators there from Antifa, and other groups. But along comes this impeachment, and the reason for this impeachment is not to keep Trump down. It's actually going to give him oxygen. They want to make sure that he's convicted and can't run again for political office. Well, he's going to be 79 or 78 or whatever. It's very unlikely he runs again for president.
Yeah.
There'll be other people that emerge if, in fact, this government survives long enough to have another presidential election, which is in doubt, frankly. And what they basically want to do is to just trash him to make sure that they dance on his grave, that he's dead. And the Republicans, they're going along with it too. They want him gone because Marco Rubio, who's professing, that this is a bad, stupid idea, Marco Rubio is very happy that he's going to be kept down. So's Ted Cruz, so's the rest of them, because they want to run for president next time, not Trump. And that little dog and pony show they had over certifications, they knew that was going nowhere. That was just to try to keep the Trump supporters possibly attuned to what they're doing. It was a complete joke. But let me get to the point here, is that the judiciary, the federal judiciary, that Jefferson believed would be the biggest threat to the continued republic, because they're not accountable. They're not elected like the other two branches of government. We saw that Trump's own judges at the lower level stabbed him in the back. We saw that his 3 Supreme Court justices, which he bragged about, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, Coney Barrett. They stabbed him as if they were Brutus in the Roman Senate. At insult to injury, then the actual president of the Senate did stab him in the back, Mike Pence. Trump wasn't asking to have the election overturned, just to send it back to the states for an audit to see what went on, to have a real investigation before certification. But now we see that the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court has been living in the closet for years in many ways, politically and otherwise. And the fact is that he's now not even going to preside over this impeachment. He wants to have nothing to do with it. He doesn't want to have the monkey on his back. And the reality is that he hates Trump's guts. He's made that clear over the years. He's turned left. The deep state has something on him. They flipped him. Maybe they didn't need to flip him. Maybe he was a fraud to begin with. But unbelievable. An impeachment trial and the Chief Justice will not show up. So I'll tell you who should be impeached. It should be John Roberts. He's the one that should be impeached. He's an absolute disgrace, a disgrace. And by not showing up, he's committing treason against this country.
It is pretty surprising, Larry, that they would. I mean, what can we say about the questions pertaining to the constitutionality of impeaching a former president? I mean, can't we do this to Barack Obama? Can't we do this to George W. Bush? Can't we do this to Bill Clinton if they're going to do it to Donald Trump?
Of course. I mean, and you know, it's exactly right. It's unconstitutional. So why the Chief Justice doesn't want to show up? Because he knows that there'll be one or two senators, Josh Hawley, perhaps Cruz, that make a motion, perhaps Rand Paul, to dismiss the impeachment on the grounds that it's unconstitutional. He doesn't want to put his neck on the line to do that because he wants Trump dead too. So it's a total betrayal by the Supreme Court. And ask yourself this question: if the Supreme Court is so corrupt as it truly is, think about the lower court judges who get their jobs through political patronage, campaign contributions, perks, and perhaps even on some occasions illegal bribes. As I've said before, there's a judge that was nominated and confirmed by Obama out of Rhode Island, the Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, you've seen carrying on like a lunatic during these confirmation hearings of Kavanaugh and Coney Barrett. This guy he gave a judgeship to, gave $500,000 to get his judgeship. There's another judge on the DC bench, Randolph Moss, who I've had in a case dealing with the bar, because the bar is trying to eliminate conservative lawyers, including me. They're not going to succeed. But he gave $38,000, Obama appointee. He dismissed the case, went up on appeal. Then the DC Circuit, which is very leftist, they affirmed in any event, they don't care. This is a whole nother issue, and we'll talk about this later. But these judges are bought and paid for, like the judges on the court of St. James in England with King George III. And now you can see it. They don't stand up to the American people. So getting back to the point, what do the American people do when they don't have a judiciary that will protect them? At what point do they say, I've had enough, I can't take any more? And you saw that 2 weeks ago Wednesday. That was by and large what happened. And people spin this idea, this was a bunch of crazy people, right-wing extremists. Nancy Pelosi introduces legislation that basically says if you're white and if you're conservative, you're somehow a domestic terrorist.
Yeah.
And here we go with an inquisition against conservatives, people of faith, and those who believe in the vision of our founding fathers. Now you still have tens of thousands of National Guard troops in Washington. Can you believe that?
I've witnessed it firsthand, Larry. They were asking me where I was going and how much time I was going to be spending there. It was really upsetting. Even more upsetting is that we've learned earlier today, FBI agents from the Omaha field office, I don't know, maybe Brandon was traveling, but friend of the show, Brandon Straka, everybody knows he's the founder of the Walk Away campaign. He's an openly gay former leftist who realized after the election of Donald Trump that he wasn't down with these leftist kind of, the whole ideology, and he was very effective. He became a close friend of Laura Trump. He's met the president. He's spoken at all kinds of events. They've now thrown him in jail, and they've cited various things that he said on video at the Capitol. He did enter the Capitol. I think a lot of people who were there are going to get into a lot of trouble now.
Well, yeah, they're tracking him down. They're hunting him down like animals. That's what they're doing right now, and the FBI is doing the bidding. Why do you think Biden and Harris kept Christopher Wray? The guy's a lapdog. He's a lackey. He wants to keep his job. He'll do what he's told, and he helps subvert investigations of Russian collusion and Biden's laundering of money through his son from the Ukraine, from Russia, from China. Ask yourself this question. If Communist China had been in charge of the Capitol 2 weeks ago Wednesday,
they would have shot everybody.
They would have murdered everybody. They would have murdered you too. You were there as a journalist, okay?
Well, I was far enough away they might have missed me, but they would have shot into the crowd and just indiscriminately.
You didn't go into the Capitol or anything. You were peaceful. But they would have murdered everybody. Now, who is now the president of the United States?
China Joe.
Someone who has been bribed to the hilt with millions and millions of dollars, laundered through his son, who was sitting there at the Capitol at the time that his father was being sworn in as president of the United States. Somebody who's bought and paid for by the communist butchers of Beijing. This is our president, perhaps the biggest criminal, might even surpass Hillary Clinton. We don't know exactly how much he's laundered into the family coffers yet. Might even surpass the Clintons for criminality. This is the guy. 47 years in Congress, comes out a millionaire, owns multiple houses, and according to, the laptop and some of the documents that came out, which of course the FBI did nothing about. They'd rather persecute, white people that are conservatives and people of faith and people who actually believe in the Constitution. He's getting 10% kickback from his son. I suspect he probably got a little more than that. So, in the next month.
50%. They said he had to give half the money to the big guy, didn't he?
The big guy. Yeah, I don't know where he's big, but anyways, the big guy. But I think he's probably pretty small. But in any event.
Not talking about the brain. His brain.
Yeah,
is
I'm not
tiny.
talking about his brain either. And this is what we've got running this country right now. Okay, and it is frightening. He's ended the Alaska pipeline. He's allowing people to swarm into the United States yet again from our southern border. He's getting down to Russia. Why did he have to sign a treaty so quick without getting anything in exchange? It's like Jimmy Carter when he gave up, medium-range missiles in Europe with the Soviet Union years ago. On and on and on and on. Transsexuals in government because they're transsexual. Okay, people are qualified. Let them in. I don't care what they are. But he picks people because of what they are. Their race, their color, their sexual persuasion. It can be.
That is racism, by the way, isn't it, Larry?
They can come in.
That is the definition of racism, isn't it? Just selecting someone.
It is. And then we've got on top of this, layered on top of that, with no justice system that will defend the American people, much less Trump. Then we've got these industrialists. It reminds me of the years leading up to the rise of Hitler and thereafter, where you had, industrialists, BMW, Mercedes, Lights, Deutsche Bank, that actually financed the concentration camps that killed 6 million people, not just Jews, but others as well, people that were retarded, infirm, mentally ill. You've got universities. You've got sports leagues. You've got bar associations that are trying to eliminate conservative lawyers, not just me and the District of Columbia Bar and New York Bar, Rudy Giuliani, Ted Cruz, Josh Hawley, Bill Barr, who I don't even like, but they are entertaining a bar complaint against him just for remarks he made on Fox News and withdrawing the indictment with Michael Flynn. Kellyanne Conway.
Bill Barr or Bob Barr?
Bill Barr.
Wow. They want to remove him? I thought they like him. He didn't help Trump ultimately.
Well, they don't trust him. He goes with the wind, so who knows where he's going to go next. We'll get rid of him now. So it's every aspect. Is people see that they go with the winner, and the winner is Biden and Harris. And then a lot of them, you don't have to push them too hard because they're ideologically very leftist or socialist or communist, like the big tech, which, by the way, I sued just the other day. I sued Actually, it was today, actually. I sued Amazon and I sued Apple, and I also sued Google over what happened with Parler because they interfered with my Parler account. So I sued them. So that case is alive, and that's in the Southern District of Florida. People can see it at freedomwatchusa.org. It hasn't been reported yet, but it will be. But it's every aspect of society, okay? And it's a full court press. It's an inquisition. It's a purge to destroy any opposition. And then layer that with the tens of thousands of troops in Washington, D.C., as if we're some, communist dictatorship, communist China, Soviet Union, you name it, or Iran, or North Korea. And this country is far beyond anything that Ayn Rand predicted in Atlas Shrugged or George Orwell in 1984. We're in the twilight zone right now, twilight zone of repression.
It's unbelievable, Larry. I mean, I've just been sent the complaint here against Brandon. The news report that we saw said that it's unclear if he's got a lawyer yet. I don't know. I haven't spoken to Brandon in a couple of days, but it's a bad situation. All these people. There's somebody who I think committed suicide over being arrested with the Capitol. And it's funny, Larry, because there's this kid, John Sullivan, who he was arrested and released. And it really, you're absolutely right. They're using it as a weapon here. This guy, Real Jaden X, is John Sullivan. He's on the video leading the riot, and his own brother reported him to the FBI. All right, finally, they've suspended this guy's account. But you know what? He was active when the President of the United States had been suspended, and this account featured videos of Sullivan leading the riot into the Capitol. He was at the tip of the spear when the Air Force veteran Ashley Babbitt was shot. His own father is a Air Force general who resigned in disgrace after being reprimanded for mishandling a shipment of nuclear warheads to Taiwan. So there's something going on here that we don't yet fully understand, and there's this rush to impeachment, to just basically paper over the facts with their version of what they want everybody to believe. And all of these pseudo-intellectuals who watch CNN and MSNBC and read the Washington Post, they think that's what happened.
And Fox lies repeatedly. Fox lies, as much as the others lie. Okay, because they're in Washington. Oh, don't hurt me. I'm in Washington. My city's been attacked. You know why it's attacked? Because you never really did a decent job of journalism and uncovering and holding people accountable, along with the legal system, of the rank corruption in Washington, D.C. People have had it. They're done. They're done with the Republican Party. That's done. Stick a fork in it. It's an absolute disgrace.
Let me ask you a question, Larry, because people are very interested in some of these different things that are arising out of the Capitol riots. There was one pretty prominent individual who was featured. It almost seemed like a joke. This guy wearing the Water Buffalo Lodge helmet and the David Lee Roth face paint, who counts himself a QAnon shaman. They threw this kid in jail, and he says he wants organic food. And then they gave it to him. When the hell does that ever happen? I mean, you've dealt with, what was the guy's name who was in jail?
They gave Michael Cohen lox and bagels when he was in prison, too. Yeah, he went to the prison.
Who was the guy that was in that awful jail that you went to see in Alaska or something like that?
Well, the worst jail in this country is in Indiana. It's where they still do executions.
Wasn't there a guy who was arrested in Alaska? He was trying to help kids or something?
Yeah, I don't want to get into that,
but they don't give him the food that he wanted, right? Who is the food in jail is sort of famously terrible.
But the point I'm making here is not to get too far off track here, because look, there are crazy people that infiltrate everything. Okay, it doesn't matter what it is. You go to a movie theater, people start screaming. Of course, you can't go to a movie theater anymore because of COVID. But the fundamental essence here is that the government has broken away from the American people. And I've been saying this over and over again in my podcast that you can get at freedomwatchusa.org. You can sign up at the Freedom Watch YouTube channel. And when in the course of human events, the sovereign, the rulers, no longer represent the people. The people, under the laws of nature and nature's God, have a right to alter or abolish that government and to form a new government by and for the people with equal rights in life, in pursuit of life, liberty, and happiness. And at the end of the most beautiful document ever written, it was inspired by God. It's as inspired, frankly, as the Bible, both the Old and New Testaments. And the founding fathers say, you know, and again, I'm paraphrasing because Thomas Jefferson was much more eloquent than Larry Klayman, but with divine providence, we pledge our fortunes, our sacred honor, and risk our lives to form a new nation. And that's the point that we're at. And so I'm going to be holding, in addition to citizens' grand juries and seeking the indictment of the Bidens and the Obamas, the Clintons, Clapper and Brennan. Brennan's now talking about inquisition against, you know, white conservatives and who else. You know, I mean, this guy's not even a Christian. He's a Muslim. He has a prayer book. He had it at the CIA. So I don't know what he's talking about. But, you know, they believe get rid of the infidels. But the reality here is that this country is currently gone. The government is gone. So I'm calling for a Third Continental Congress in Philadelphia in May and in June and bring together experts and talk about how we can reenact our Constitution, make some changes, take the immunity away from government officials and judges, make it clear that they don't have it. It's not in the Constitution to begin with. They gave it to themselves, which was quite nice. To make sure that we have discrimination, not just on the basis of race, religion, sex, and national origin, but on personal beliefs and political beliefs. That should be discriminatory. If the Supreme Court can find gay marriage out of a document which has nothing to do with gay marriage, that is the Constitution, then we certainly can put into a new Constitution, reenacted Constitution, those rights. And we can nominate a president, we can set up a mechanism to elect a Congress. We can have a real Supreme Court, not with a bunch of political hacks that got there with special interest money, as we've seen with a Chief Justice that is scared of his shadow. And we form a new nation. We're not going to be violent. We're not going to threaten them. If they come for us, we have our Second Amendment rights. But nobody's going to hurt anybody. And the people that went into the Capitol 2 weeks ago Wednesday, by and large, were not there to hurt anybody. They had reached the point where they couldn't take it anymore. And that's where the country is right now. And, you know, they watch Sean Hannity every night, and he says, oh, justice tomorrow, major breaking news. But they see no justice, right? For 4 years and longer than that. And they reach the point where they see this whole thing is just a complete sham. Like you said at the beginning, a mockery of a travesty, the sham of a mockery of a travesty. Woody Allen, you know, there's a little clip, and I don't advocate this, but Woody Allen is perhaps, I think, the most brilliant satirist, you know, of the modern era, whatever you may think about it, okay? Otherwise, and I don't think he sexually abused his kids or anything like that. I think that was the setup. But that being said, there's a little clip. I might have mentioned it last time I was on. In Manhattan, he's at a socialite party, and they ask him, "What are you doing lately?" He's there with Diane Keaton, you know, who starred in that movie with him. And they ask him, the socialites, "What are you doing?" He says, "Well, I just quit my job. Maybe it wasn't very smart, but I'm writing a book. However, the Nazis are marching in New Jersey this week." He says, "Why don't we get some bricks and bats and show them what it's all about, right?" So one of the socialites says to him, "Maybe we can play it, we can find it."
I can't find it. And I probably would get in trouble for playing it.
No, because we're not advocating violence, but he's making a point. So he says, well, the woman says, "Well, there was a great satire in the New York Times." He says, "Well, I think bricks and bats really make the point. I think it's much more effective." Then another guy comes in and says, well, another socialite, "Well, that was really great. Wasn't it that satire?" He said, "You know, satire doesn't work. You know, I believe in force when it comes to people that wear shiny boots."
I think the best job Woody Allen ever had in a movie was this testing out of the exercise desk where he, it's the guy who's the father from Different Strokes is trying to sell this.
Yeah, but it makes a point because we don't want to see the violence. But, when you're dealing with Nazis, okay, and that's what these people are. These people, these communists and these socialists and others, National Socialists, that was the Nazi Party. And when they take control of the whole country, squash all dissent, all free speech, you're back to Nazi Germany, or you're back to the Bolshevik Revolution and thereafter, or you're back to Iran with the Ayatollahs, or North Korea. This is where we're at right now. I don't think people realize this. And I get up every morning. You ask me, Larry, you look troubled, before we came on. Yeah, I look troubled. You know what? Because I see this country nearly gone. And to me, the only solution now, it's no longer at the ballot box. Look at the clowns. Look at the clowns that impeached Trump for no reason. Okay, and the Republicans that went along with it. There's nobody up there that stands up for anything. Chief Justice doesn't even show up to an impeachment trial.
It's unbelievable.
We don't have a government. We don't. It's working against us. So let's form a new one. So, that's what I'm going to be doing, and the citizens' grand juries. And what goes on in the court of law right now, it's a joke. I say that in my book. It takes a revolution. Forget the scandal industry. I go through the Federal Judicial Hall of Shame, okay, and my experiences with them. And to get them to reach, these issues and have any courage. They're all establishment people. They got there by money lining the pockets of politicians. They don't want to stick their neck out, and they've got a great life. They think lifetime tenure. They don't really. They're there for good behavior. And they're not going to rock the boat. They have great health insurance. They've got pensions, and all the bribes they can stuff in their pocket.
Yeah. People are having a negative reaction to our comments about Woody Allen. I want to clarify. I don't love Woody Allen. I find those films funny. And I mean, again, I think that Roman Polanski is a disgusting guy, but Chinatown is undeniably one of the best movies ever made. So
no one says, Jason, you worship I don't worship anybody except God and His Son. Okay, but what I'm saying is, you can make a point with humor. Okay,
right.
As a satirist, he makes a lot of points. I remember one time in Take the Money and Run, his first movie, where he went into a bank. I'm going to get people madder yet. And he gave the teller a note, and she says, "I can't read this thing." Robert, he says, "What does this say? I have a gub?" He says, "No, it clearly says I have a gun." Okay.
Yeah, he gets into an argument with it.
No. By the time it's over, he gets arrested. He gets taken to prison, and he carries on in prison. And to punish him, they put him in solitary confinement with an insurance salesman. Okay, so there's certain things. There's certain things that you can use humor to make a point. Okay, so nobody's worshiping Woody Allen.
Right. Yeah, and people are now commenting about other Roman Polanski films. But let's just get back to some of the things that are happening, Larry, because you mentioned Josh Hawley, Ted Cruz. Anyone who even supported Donald Trump, they want to destroy now. We have open calls in public by major media figures suggesting that there should be internment camps, reprogramming. I mean, this is straight Nazism, insanity. It's no longer okay to have debate, to entertain alternative viewpoints, to explore other ideas. I mean, they want to shut down any kind of debate. For example, Larry, if we say anything about the masks or whatever, I could be completely thrown off of YouTube, but this is really just simple logic. You don't need to be an MD. If you had any kind of ailment, even a rash, and a doctor prescribed a treatment for 11 months that was making it worse, and then that doctor said, "Oh no, we have to keep doing this," wouldn't people seek a second opinion?
Well, see, just today, okay, the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, okay, declares that people can now go back to restaurants. They don't have to be confined to their house. They don't have to have 2-week quarantines when they fly into a Florida city. Now, why did he do in a California city? Why did he do that? Because there's now 1 million names on a petition to recall him, to throw him out of office. Okay?
Well, isn't it because Biden is in and they wanted everybody to be as miserable as possible
and
under Trump?
Little has changed. There's a new strain of the COVID-19. Nothing has changed. And he says, well, there's a downward curve now. Well, he just simply wants to save his his political skin. He's out of there, by the way. He's going to be going. California probably get somebody even worse than him coming in.
They put back Schwarzenegger.
What a moron he is. But he's busy with his maid probably.
Larry, the president has opened his office of the former president in Florida. Do we know anything about that yet?
Well, they're trying to throw him out of Mar-a-Lago. They
What?
say that
Doesn't he own it?
Well, he owns it, but apparently they claim, the left, that, when he bought Mar-a-Lago and made certain improvements and made a club, that he promised he would never use it as a residence. It would only be a club. So they're trying to throw him out of Florida now, too. And anybody in and around Trump, they're trying to destroy. Look at Mike Lindell, the owner of MyPillow. Look at what they're doing for this poor guy. Someone who had a tough life in his early life, became a devout Christian, a really nice person, a good person, who viciously, the left, through Newsweek, which is a total rag. It's not the Newsweek it used to be, never was much of anything to begin with. But, today they wrote an article, and Mike wants me to represent him. I'll do it for free. I hope he's watching. Is that they accused him of causing the insurrection along with Trump.
That's absurd.
And they have a petition, the leftists. They claim 60,000 names. So leftists and others will boycott Bed Bath & Beyond, Mayfair, Wayfair, and others, so they won't sell his pillows. And he's already lost those accounts. Okay? Now, what did the poor guy do other than believe in Donald Trump? Okay, and make a nice pillow, makes nice dog beds and all kinds of things. And he looks like a really nice guy. He's the kind of people you need for this country.
There's an interesting angle in this for you, Larry, because I don't know if you're aware of what the contents of this note he was carrying when he was photographed entering the White House. I don't know if you're aware of what this says, but it talks about hammer and scorecard, and there was a report that said that Mr. Lindell brought President Trump an article from The American Report, which is a website maintained by Mary Fanning, who thinks that a gentleman named Dennis is a super duper witness and is constantly trying to get that guy's information in front of the president. I believe, Larry, that everything that we're talking about was designed to wrap up President Trump's supporters in a box and then crush everybody in that box. This was all tricks and deceptions to draw the president and his supporters into a trap, which is what I believe happened at the Capitol.
Well, I don't know. I don't agree with you, Jason, on that. And in all due respect, I love you. You're my friend, but I don't.
We can disagree.
No, I don't. I
I
don't.
We can.
I saw this coming for so long, and it's in my book. It Takes a Revolution. Okay, it was going to manifest itself in some way, and occasionally, eventually, it boils over, and people react. It wasn't just a setup. That's a convenient excuse by people that don't want to take responsibility for where this country's going, which is into the shitter. Excuse the French. It's already in the.
It's in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's in there, and. There are probably people that tried to manipulate it, but there were a lot of good people that were in the Capitol. And, now they're hunting them all down. They're hunting people that weren't even in the Capitol, that just happened to be there. So, I just don't buy that. It's twice too clever. They wanted us dead to begin with. It wouldn't have mattered whether there were people in there that were, setting things up or not. They want us gone. And once these people grab power, which they have, they'll never get it back. And you can see the troops in Washington. And the irony is that Biden and Harris are even afraid of the troops. They're afraid the troops are going to turn on them. That's why
they wanted to interview them all, right? How much of an insult is that to a member of the U.S. Army to have their loyalty questioned?
Well, 7 days in May. 7 Days at the Condor. I don't remember these movies or whatever. But, these things are plausible in today's world. You never would have thought it before, and I don't advocate it, but the very thought of a coup d'etat is no longer far-fetched. You push the military too hard, you push the police too hard.
Well, we just had a coup d'etat, but it was carried out by an old guy in sunglasses and a mask.
Who are you talking about?
Talking about President Dumb Joe.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know, but this is where we're at, and you can see it, and the viciousness of the left. You've got, radical blacks are being used by radical whites. You've got radical Marxians of the Jewish left. I'm of Jewish origin, so can't call me an anti-Semite, but that's a reality. Most Jewish people are not that way. They're trying to destroy Israel too, as we speak. You've got radical Muslims. You've got radical feminists. You've got a radical LGBTQ. You've got radical atheists. They're all banding together. And now that they've assumed control, you can expect them to start fighting with each other and destroying each other as well. And you see that in Seattle and Portland. They're not happy with Biden.
Yeah.
He's not radical enough for them. So the country is unglued right now as the rest of the world's looking on. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea, even elements of Cuba still. Some people think they still have an atomic weapon or two down there.
Cuba.
And they're looking at us and saying, when can we pounce? When can we pounce on the United States? Can we finish them off and divide up what they've got? And, they probably don't even have to, because these people are ideological kin. Bernie Sanders, honeymoon in Moscow.
He's more popular than ever due to sitting in that chair with his mittens. Larry, another friend of the show, Laura Loomer, has recently posted an article. She's attempting to exercise her Second Amendment rights by protecting herself, carrying a firearm. And she's been put on some kind of list with the FBI denying her the constitutional right to own a gun. She's not a felon.
That's another example. I knew of that, Jason. I mean, Laura had told me that a while back, but she let it out so I can talk about it now. Otherwise, it was attorney-client. But what did she do? In protest, she jumped the fence at Nancy Pelosi's house, or she went over the fence at Gavin Newsom's house in Sacramento, or she chained herself to, Twitter in New York City. I mean, she did this to make a point. She herself was assaulted by Rashida Tlaib, that went on an anti-Semitic diatribe last week against Israel, calling it an apartheid state, saying the Israelis were denying vaccines to the Palestinians. Palestinians have all the money they need. They get it from the United Nations. It's wandered through. They get their own vaccines. So, she didn't do anything violent, but that's probably the reason why they're using it as a pretext to deny herself.
Well, she wasn't convicted of anything.
Rights.
Violent or not, she wasn't convicted of a felony. So how can they just arbitrarily take away her rights because they don't like what she's done?
Well, they can't, but they did, obviously, and they can do what they want. I've had clients that were surveilled by the deep state, by the intelligence agencies. They were never allowed to find out what was going on. This happened under the administration of George W. Bush. And then Obama made it even worse. By the way, the scene of those presidents at the Capitol, the President's Club, was just, frankly, just disgusting. Really disgusting. And George W. Bush, the moron that he is, he doesn't even know what he walks into. It's like Rodney Dangerfield. Look out for number one and don't step in number two. The capacity to step in number two. What a disgrace. The entire Republican Party is a total disgrace.
And let me just shift gears for a second, Larry, because a lot of people were sad to learn that baseball legend and civil rights hero Hank Aaron died last week, just 2 weeks after getting a coronavirus vaccine. Any comments on this?
Well, Larry King died last weekend, too, of COVID-19. God knows what he got. And there was somebody who died recently, and I know from my own doctor, who's a very honest guy, he's not conservative or anything like that, is that it's very problematic, these vaccines, is that there have been 30 reported deaths, at least as of the time I got something from him last week. And you can imagine how many that haven't been reported at all.
Did you say you got the vaccine last week?
No, I got a little email from my doctor, basically saying that he recommended that people, unless they have, even if you're older like I am, unless you have a particular pre-existing condition, don't get the vaccine yet.
Your doctor told you not to get the vaccine. And it seems that California has urged a halt to 300,000 vaccines after some fell ill.
Yeah, well, you can expect that. Look, these are major corporations that want to make money. They're not going to tell you everything. I used to represent the FDA. I mean, I can tell you, and my dad would tell you, may his soul rest in peace, that we had, um, what was that disease? Made your brain crazy, mad cow's disease.
Oh yeah.
We had this in this country. It was rampant, and it was suppressed. There's a whistleblower that came to see me about that. My dad confirmed it because he was in the meatpacking business. This was all over the United States. We didn't know that. We thought it was only in Belgium. You know, that's what goes on. Look, you can't believe a word the government tells you anymore. And if you do, you're stupid.
Now,
if you do, you're stupid.
People in our comments are saying that Larry King had received the vaccine, and then the news I'm seeing here from Google is saying he was being treated for COVID. Do we know if he had the vaccine?
I don't know if he had the vaccine or not, but we do know, and you know, we had somebody on your show a while back with me, a different show, is that most of the people that are in hospitals now are there over the ordinary flu, and that it's quite normal during flu season that hospitals are totally filled to the top with people. And we don't know exactly the mix of who's dying with COVID and who's dying, you know, it's because of ordinary flu or some other illness. But that's the problem, is that we don't get the truth. And you still see this clown Fauci, you know, prancing around, you know, like he's God, you know, he's the guru. And of course, Biden made him the guru, continued guru. We don't know what to believe anymore. And to some extent, that's what helped contribute to Trump's defeat too. It wasn't all election fraud. Even with the fraud, maybe if he had behaved differently and, you know, not been so abrasive and out of control from time to time, and maybe if he had actually, you know, stayed on top of the COVID-19 crisis, maybe things might have been a little different, even with all the fraud. But the thing's been missing.
Be careful saying that, because I think YouTube wants to throw me off for suggestions of that. I got to say, Larry, again, we'll talk about it later, but without even being a doctor, I don't understand. I mean, there are people who I had hired at 21st Century 3D who, after the point that I realized that they were incapable of doing the job, I fired them. If we were having a disaster for 10 months and somebody who was in charge, why bring him back? That makes no sense. They're blaming this on Donald Trump, but he wasn't running the CDC. He wasn't giving us all the information about what should be done.
Today Biden says, well, you know, I don't know when this thing's going to end. You know, when he promised the American people he'd end it quickly. He said, well, it's just going to have to play itself out. You know, typical politicians. And this gets back to the original theme, is that people don't have a government that they can trust. The people that run our government it's infested with criminals. They're never held accountable, even during the Trump years. I mean, look at all the mistakes that Trump made by not taking control of his Justice Department. You know, they're trashing him now, saying that he was conspiring to get rid of the acting Attorney General, this guy Rosen, right? That was his prerogative, and he should have done it sooner with all these people. And he should have released Hillary's 33,000 emails, which he had the power to do. He should have declassified everything, and he should have ordered people to conduct real investigations. And if they didn't, fire them. That was his job. So he was listening to bad advice from the Republican establishment, people like Matt Schlapp, whatever his name is, you know, feeding them bullshit, people like that, continuously. Oh, you got to take it easy. You know, you got to, you know, look like you're presidential. You know what? Presidential got his head chopped off like Marie Antoinette and Louis XV. That's how presidential he was. So he wasn't strong enough, and he didn't fight enough. And he threw his league with the wrong people, like Roger Stone. I suspect that, you know, Roger egged him on to say some things 2 weeks ago Wednesday. But even with that, it wasn't violent. He didn't advocate violence, but he said it in a way that he handed them a way to chop his head off.
And what do you see happening with Rudy Giuliani? He made a really unfortunate comment about trial by combat or something. I mean, in retrospect, it was a terrible thing to say. They want to disbar Rudy. What's going to happen?
I don't think Rudy cares about being disbarred or not. Look, we don't have a legal system anymore. What do you need to be a lawyer for? Rudy's a multimillionaire. He has a security company. He's made a lot of money. However, he was sued apparently yesterday for $1.8 billion by Dominion.
That's a lot.
Voting machines. And, you know, why did it take Dominion so long to sue Rudy? I mean, you got to ask yourself the question, is there any evidence left of what went on? I don't know what went on. I'm not making an accusation one way or the other, but why did they wait so long to sue Rudy Giuliani? Why did they wait so long to sue Sidney Powell? Why?
Well, why?
I don't know. It'd certainly be an opportunity to get rid of evidence, wouldn't it?
Huh. I
Because
got to tell you,
truth is a defense. Truth is a defense.
I don't trust these lawsuits, and frankly, I don't trust any of these lawyers that were handling them. They were so poorly executed. It's astounding to me, the releasing of the Kraken, all of this crap with Germany and Scattle and the Hammer and Scorecard. It all seemed totally ridiculous to me. And when we look back on it in retrospect, it was like people running around with their hair on fire, no organization whatsoever. It was very badly handled, in my estimation.
Well, it's because the president didn't take control. He didn't take control. He got dragged along. And again, Jason, we have to thank him for what he did. And I fought hard for him, even though, I didn't get taken into the inner circle. I did it from the outside at Freedom Watch and my private practice, and I took risks to try to help him. But he didn't help himself much either. And that's the tragedy of the whole thing. And the moral to the story is, we've got about 9 minutes left. It's what I wrote in my book, is that it's now up to us, the American people. There is no political messiah. It's up to us as it was to our founding fathers in 1776. They tried to reason with King George III. They couldn't do it. And they got to a point where they had to form a new nation. And they had to, in effect, storm the Capitol. What do you think they did? Okay, that's what I'm saying. They were violent. Okay, they declared war on the British crown. And they won with the help of France. And again, neither you nor I are advocating violence. But what I'm saying is that the American people are going to rise up when the left comes for you, and they come for your house, and they come for your car, and they come for everything that you own, and divide it up. And there's nothing left. And then they won't let you talk, and they won't let you exercise your Second Amendment rights, because that's coming now too. That's going to be cut way back, the ability to own firearms. When they control all three branches of government, they've got a stranglehold on all of us. They control the media, they control big tech, they control the universities, they control the sports leagues that are bowing down to Allah, in effect. They control everything. And we now are an endangered species. If you are white, if you are religious, if you are someone who believes in the vision of our founding fathers, and even if you're not white, if you believe in those things, you're now scheduled for extinction. And that's what they're trying to do.
Yeah, it's very troubling, Larry. One of the things, we just have a few minutes left here, but one of the most upsetting things that happened, that upset me the most towards the end of Donald Trump's presidency, was this action taken by Twitter, where they just completely deleted his account. I saw the tweets. I didn't think they were that problematic. Whatever I think about it doesn't matter, but we've got this big problem where an unelected collection of the oldest people there are 40. Many of them aren't even American or don't share the values that have made America the country that it is. They think hate speech is not free speech and that it should be suppressed and that they have the right to do it. My issue is Twitter has demonstrated for the world that they have the power to silence the President of the United States. Forget about Donald Trump for a moment. The office of the President of the United States. I find it stunning and hugely problematic that no action has been taken against Twitter, particularly when they've demonstrated how freely they will use these anti-competitive practices to shut down even a remotely viable competitor.
I did. 2.5 years ago, Laura and Freedom Watch and I filed a lawsuit against Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, all of them, Google, antitrust lawsuit. That's a viable lawsuit. Again, how long did it take the Trump Justice Department to bring a case? Only at the very end. It's a half-assed case, excuse the language again, and you can bet that's going to be dismissed under Biden. So it's an antitrust violation. And they talk about 230. No one knows what 230 is. You know what it is. I know what it is. That has nothing to do with monopolization or abuse of a dominant position. That's having immunity for putting stuff up on the internet, okay? The antitrust division, my alma mater, I helped break up AT&T, has been sitting there, you know, playing patty cakes for all these years. Why didn't Trump order them to break them up? He had that ability. He didn't understand. You know, he had good instincts, but he didn't understand. And he got bad advice. The people around him really disturbed him because he hired everybody off of Fox News. If you got on Hannity or you got on a show, okay, I'll hire you. That's great. You're on TV. But you know what? They didn't know what they were doing, and they gave him bad advice, and they weren't honest with him. And that's the sad part. And I hope that the president goes on. I hope he buys a network and wipes Fox News off the face of the earth and allows people like me and like you and others and my clients, Joe Arpaio and Klayman Bundy, to talk to the American people. Tell them the truth. You're not going to hear what I'm saying on any network. And I don't care to go on Fox. I don't care to go on. If I have to say what everybody else is saying, if I have to wear a low-cut dress like Sarah Carter, you know, and let my boobs hang out,
I don't know if that would work for you, Larry.
No, no, right? I mean, I want to say what I have to say, and it needs to be said.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we're just about out of time. A lot of people in our comments seem to think that Donald Trump has played us. I don't know that we can draw that conclusion. Obviously, his presidency did not go the way we wanted it to, but I believe he was trying to drain the swamp, and the swamp don't want to be drained.
He was well-intentioned. He didn't know how to do it. And he had all the levers of power, but he never used the power. For instance, at the very end, he could have declared martial law and called for a new election and allowed the Democrats to actually monitor it, as Republicans were prevented from doing. But what could be more important than having an honest election? What could be more important than keeping these socialists and communists and atheists and others from controlling our lives? He didn't pull the trigger, figuratively. And, you know, now he's been shown the door. It's time for us to move on. I hope people will read the Declaration of Independence. I would like them to read my book. I'm not really going to make any money off of it. You can get it, ironically, at Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. If you go to freedomwatchusa.org with a $50 contribution that we'll use for citizens' grand juries, third continental congresses, and our cases, we'll give it to you for free. But please read it, because what I wrote had nothing to do with the election. It was talking about where we were going, and my predictions, as you know, Jason. You know, I'm not a genie. Okay, I'm not a soothsayer. I'm not Karnak the Magnificent. I'm not Klayman the Magnificent.
But this is.
But I was right. I was right about everything. I was telling you nothing was ever going to happen with these phony investigations. Nothing was ever going to happen with regard to. And I predicted. I told you Trump wasn't going to win. They were going to steal the election. Well, I wasn't doing it.
Speaking of phonies, Larry, and we'll take it out with this question. One of my least favorite, popular by mistake dopes, Devin Nunes, is he's always calling for things. He's never actually doing anything except his own stupid lawsuits, but he's calling for racketeering investigation into Amazon and Apple following, why not Twitter? I don't see why Twitter isn't on here.
This is the bullshit. He goes on Hannity and spews the bullshit. Maria Bartiromo is smart, but he spews it on her show too. Who's going to do the investigation? He doesn't control anything anymore. The Republicans don't control any aspect of government. And even when they did, they never did it. Oh, yeah, I made a new criminal referral to the Justice Department. Went into the trash. He knows that.
Yeah,
when I went to see him about mass surveillance of the American people, not just Trump, he turned a blind eye. This was years ago. So did Richard Burr of the Senate.
I do have a question, though, Larry, because conspicuously absent from this list is Twitter, the ones who led the charge against Parler. But I would think that all of these ridiculous, feckless lawsuits that had basically been totally dismissed, of Devin Nunes suing Twitter, have perhaps hurt his, his position against Twitter, and they're not mentioned here. Is that incorrect?
I don't know, but he's a blowhard. I mean, that's what he is. He's out here. And they all are up there. Can you name one congressman that you would trust? Can you name one senator that's done anything for us?
I think Rand Paul has his...
And then everybody was extolling the virtue of McConnell, right? He stabbed the president in the back.
Not me.
Right? What did he get us? He got us Coney Barrett, Kavanaugh, and Gorsuch. Great. What you got is a bunch of political hacks that threw the president under the bus. That was a great case that they brought in Texas. It deserved to be heard.
Yeah. Yeah, that was a real travesty. There were a number of people, including people who don't like President Trump, who told me that that Texas case should have gone. I never trusted Mitch McConnell. I never trusted Devin Nunes. These guys are all dopes, in my view. And Larry, I know a lot of people love seeing you on the show. You call it like it is. You had a lot of this pegged months ago, years ago.
I've lived it, Jason, for 43 years as a lawyer. I've lived it. And I can tell you, the legal profession is the most corrupt profession in this country and the world, in every country. Why is it that the Congress is so corrupt? It's chock full of lawyers because they're immoral,
Yeah.
they're unethical. The bar associations are, at least New York and DC, there's some good ones, but New York and DC is corrupt to the core. They all gave heavy money to Biden. There was even a hearing committee concerning me where you had a communist sitting on it. Michael Tiger, who's the father of John Tiger. John Tiger in Oakland, California, that enjoined Trump's immigration policy for asylum. So, this is what you're dealing with. And if you don't have a legal system that you can use peacefully and legally, what's the alternative?
Here's your buddy, Larry. There's
There he is.
Tiger. Hanging out in Cuba in 1978 with Raul Castro.
Well, you should see the thank you letter of Fidel. Fidel, by the way, in a smaller way, was every bit as bad as Hitler. Killed children, sunk boats leaving the harbor. This guy was a vicious killer, a degenerate. And years ago, I even got to know his daughter. His daughter couldn't stand him. She defected and went to Miami. Lena Rodriguez.
I seem to remember something about that.
Yeah.
Well, Larry, it's always good to see you. I want to remind people to visit freedomwatchusa.org and make a tax-deductible contribution to the legal fund that helps move all this stuff forward. $50 or higher will get you a free copy of Larry's book, It Takes a Revolution. Forget the scandal industry. And as you said, Larry, the legal profession is one of the most corrupt. I'm learning that the hard way as
It's the most corrupt, Jason. It's the most corrupt. That's why I started Judicial Watch in 1994. I saw that. I said, listen, if I didn't start Judicial Watch, I'd be flipping hamburgers. I'd rather do that at McDonald's.
Well, yeah, it might be hot behind that grill. And Larry, people can support my efforts to counteract lawfare by going to crowdsourcethetruth.com and checking out the Counter Lawfare Fund. People get free annual subscriptions with their sponsorship of the Counter Lawfare Fund, and it's a great way to help me show social engineers and practitioners of lawfare that they're not going to be able to beat us with this crap. I'm realizing that lawfare is far more prevalent than I ever knew. Larry, I look forward to our next conversation. Thank you for joining me.
God bless you, Jason. And I want to say thank you for you, because without you, we would not be able to get the truth out. Crowdsource the truth.
I appreciate you saying that, Larry, and I appreciate all the generous sponsors and viewers who make this show possible. Thanks for watching. I'll see everybody tomorrow. Have a great night.